The concrete slab weighed 11 tons. It crushed Michael Reeves in under 2 seconds. Spine compressed, ribs shattered, heart stopped cold. 17 minutes later, every medic on site had turned away. The monitor showed flatline. The protocol said stop. The senior paramedic pulled the sheet over his face. Time of death, 14:47. But Lena Cross didn't move. She was still kneeling in the rubble, both hands locked on his chest, counting compressions like a machine. Blood streaked her sleeves. Dust coated her face. Her breath came hard and fast, but her rhythm never broke. "Cross, step back," her supervisor barked. "He's gone." She didn't even look up. 3 more minutes. "You're wasting resources. We've got 6 more trapped." 3 more minutes. Her voice cut through the chaos, low, flat, and absolute. If you want to see how far a story like this can travel, drop a comment with the city you're watching from. Like this video, follow along to the very end, and let's see how far this one goes. The collapse happened at 2:31 p.m. on a Tuesday. Lena Cross was 3 blocks away when the call came through. Structural failure, multi-story commercial building, downtown Ashford. The dispatcher's voice had that edge to it, the one that meant casualties were already confirmed. She grabbed her medkit, slid into the passenger seat of the rescue rig, and didn't say a word the whole ride over. Her partner, Danny Ortega, kept glancing at her. "You good?" "Fine." "You look tense." "I'm always tense." He didn't push. Danny had been riding with her for 8 months, long enough to know that Lena Cross didn't do small talk, didn't do jokes, and didn't do anything that wasn't directly tied to keeping people alive. She was competent, quiet, and cold as hell when she needed to be. The other paramedics respected her. They just didn't like her much. When they pulled up to the site, it was worse than the radio made it sound. The building, a 6-story mixed-use complex called the Harlow Center, had folded in on itself like a deck of cards. Steel beams jutted out at broken angles. Glass glittered across the pavement like crushed diamonds. Dust hung in the air so thick you could taste metal and drywall with every breath. Firefighters were already setting up perimeters, and the incident commander was shouting orders through a megaphone, trying to organize the chaos that was spinning out faster than anyone could control. Lena stepped out, scanned the wreckage, and felt that familiar tightness in her chest. Not panic, focus. The kind that narrows the world down to one thing, the clock. Every second mattered. Every hesitation cost lives. Danny was already pulling gear from the back. "We're on triage. They've got at least 15 people trapped inside, maybe more. Engineering says the south wing is unstable. Could go any minute." She nodded, slinging her pack over her shoulder. They moved toward the staging area where a cluster of victims sat on tarps, some bandaged, some bleeding, all shaking. The walking wounded, the ones who'd made it out before the real hell started. Lena knelt beside a woman with a gash across her forehead, started cleaning the wound without a word. Her hands moved automatically. Wipe, assess, apply pressure. "Am I okay?" the woman whispered. Her eyes were wide, pupils blown. "You're fine. Stay still." "My coworker, she was right next to me when it happened. I don't know if she—" "Focus on breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth." The woman obeyed, her breath hitching. Lena worked fast, taping gauze, checking pupils, marking the woman's arm with a green tag. "Stable." She moved to the next patient without looking back. Behind her, the fire captain was coordinating with the structural engineers, debating where to cut, where to shore up, where to avoid. Voices overlapped, radios crackled. Someone was yelling about gas lines. Lena tuned it out. Her job wasn't strategy, it was survival. She treated 4 more patients in the next 10 minutes. A man with a broken wrist, a teenager with a dislocated shoulder, an older woman in shock, mumbling about her purse still being inside. Lena tagged them, moved them along, kept the line flowing. Efficient, mechanical, effective. Then the shout came. "We've got one! Northwest corner, under the main beam!" Lena's head snapped up. She saw the firefighter sprinting toward a section of collapsed flooring where a massive concrete slab had pinned someone underneath. She didn't wait for orders. She grabbed her kit and ran. By the time she got there, they'd already cleared enough debris to expose the victim. A man, mid-30s, dressed in a gray suit now soaked black with blood. His face was pale as chalk, lips blue, eyes half open and glassy. His legs were completely pinned under the slab. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and spreading too fast. "Get the lift bag under here," one of the firefighters yelled, already positioning the hydraulic equipment. Lena dropped to her knees beside the man's head, fingers going straight to his carotid. No pulse. She pressed harder, relocating, searching. Still nothing. "Danny!" He was right behind her, already pulling the AED from his pack. She ripped open the man's shirt, buttons scattering across the rubble, and slapped the pads on his chest. Hit analyze. The machine took 3 seconds that felt like 30. No shock advised. "God damn it," she muttered under her breath. She locked her hands together and started compressions anyway. Fast, deep, 30 per cycle. Her body weight drove down into his sternum, 2 inches minimum. Danny got the bag valve mask ready, started breathing for him, 2 breaths every 30 compressions. The firefighters wrestled the slab off his legs with the hydraulic lift. The concrete groaned, shifted, finally rose. The man's body jerked as the weight came off. His legs twisted at angles that shouldn't exist. But his chest didn't rise on its own. Lena kept going. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. "Lena, we need to move him," Danny said, glancing around. "We can't work him here. The whole section's unstable." She didn't stop. "Not yet. He's been down for at least 10 minutes before we even got to him." "I said not yet." "Lena, shut up and keep bagging." They loaded him onto a backboard, 4 firefighters lifting in unison. Lena didn't break rhythm once. Her arms were burning, her shoulders screaming, but she kept the compression steady. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 30. Danny kept pace with the breaths, his face tight with concentration. They carried the man to the staging area, set him down on a clear patch of asphalt. Lena stayed on top of him, still working. Sweat ran down her temples. Her forearms were cramping. She didn't care. A senior paramedic, Glenn Thorne, 20 years on the job, twice her age, 3 times as cynical, walked over, watched for a few seconds, then shook his head. "Cross. He's gone. Not calling it yet. Look at him, a systole. No response. You're just breaking ribs at this point." She didn't look up. "I'm not stopping." Glenn crouched down, put a hand on her shoulder. Not rough, but firm. "Lena, I know you want to save everyone, I get it, but this one's done. We've got other people who still have a chance. You're wasting energy that could go to them." She finally met his eyes. Hers were flat, unreadable. 3 more minutes. "You're wasting time. Then go help someone else. I'm staying." He stared at her for a long moment, jaw working. Then he stood up, muttering something under his breath that sounded like stubborn and burnout waiting to happen. But he didn't stop her. He turned and walked back toward the other patients. Lena kept going. Her hands moved like pistons. She counted in her head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 30 compressions. Then Danny gave 2 breaths. Repeat, repeat, repeat. The rhythm became automatic, her mind disconnecting from the pain in her muscles. Around her, the scene was chaos. Another victim was brought out on a stretcher, screaming, clutching what was left of his arm. A firefighter's radio crackled with updates. Secondary collapse risk now at 60%. Evacuate non-essential personnel. Someone was calling for more tourniquets. A woman was sobbing 10 feet away, calling a name over and over. But Lena heard none of it. She was locked in, the world reduced to the chest beneath her hands and the seconds ticking by. 10 minutes. Her shirt was soaked through with sweat. Her arms were shaking between compressions now, muscles twitching. Danny was watching her, not the patient. "Lena, come on, this isn't Shut up and keep bagging." He did, but his hands weren't as steady as before. 12 minutes. One of the other medics, a younger guy named Torres, maybe 2 years on the job, stopped nearby, stared. "Is she seriously still working him?" "Apparently," someone else muttered. "That's insane. He's been down for over 15 minutes. Try telling her that." Lena's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. She just kept pushing, kept counting. 15 minutes. Glenn came back, this time with the incident commander, a grizzled fire captain named Briggs, who looked like he'd been through every disaster the city had ever thrown at him. He looked at Lena, then at the monitor still showing flatline, then back at her. "Cross, I'm calling it. Time of death, 14:47. She didn't stop. "Did you hear me?" "I heard you." "Then stop. That's an order." She looked up at him, her face streaked with dust and sweat, her eyes hard as stone. You want me to stop? You're going to have to pull me off him. Briggs's jaw tightened. His face went red. You're out of line. I'm doing my job. Your job is to follow protocol. My job is to save lives. So unless you want to explain to his family why you gave up on him 17 minutes in, get the hell out of my way. The captain's face went from red to nearly purple. He opened his mouth to respond, probably to tear into her, but before he could, one of the other firefighters shouted from across the staging area, Captain, we've got another collapse. North side, multiple victims trapped. Briggs turned, hesitated for just a second, then pointed a finger at Lena. We're not done here. He stormed off, barking orders into his radio. Glenn stayed. He knelt down again, his voice softer this time, almost pleading. Lena, I've seen you work. You're one of the best we've got. Hell, maybe the best. But this isn't helping him, and it's hurting you. You're going to destroy yourself over a lost cause. She didn't answer, just kept going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 17 minutes. Her hands were numb now. Her shoulders felt like they were going to tear out of their sockets. Every compression sent a jolt of pain through her wrists, but she didn't slow down, not even a fraction. Danny was staring at her now, his expression somewhere between awe and genuine concern. Where the hell did you learn to do this? She didn't answer that either. 18 minutes. The other medics were watching now, some of them shaking their heads, some just standing there in silence. One of them muttered something about lost cause and denial. Another said something about burnout. Lena didn't care. She wasn't doing this for them. She wasn't even doing it for the man under her hands. She was doing it because she'd seen this before. She'd been here before. And she knew what happened when you quit too early. 19 minutes. Glenn stood up, turned to the growing crowd of onlookers. Somebody get a supervisor over here. She's not stopping, and I don't think she's going to. But before anyone could move, Lena did something no one expected. She stopped compressions. For a second, everyone thought she'd finally given up. Relief washed over some faces. Others just looked sad. But instead of stepping back, she shifted her position. One hand moved to his sternum, the other just below his ribs. And then she pressed down in a pattern that wasn't CPR. It wasn't anything they recognized. Her fingers moved in short, sharp pulses, 3 quick compressions, pause, 2 deep presses, pause, then a strange rolling motion that seemed to move from his chest down toward his abdomen. It looked almost like she was manipulating something inside his chest cavity, guiding something, coaxing something back into alignment. What the hell is that? Glenn whispered. Danny leaned closer, eyes wide. Lena, what are you? Quiet. Her voice was barely audible, but it cut through everything. Danny's mouth snapped shut. She kept going. The pattern was precise, deliberate, repeating in 15-second cycles. Her breathing slowed. Her face went blank, emotionless. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't guessing. She knew exactly what she was doing. And then, a sound. Faint. Barely audible over the background noise. A breath. Danny froze. Did he just... Lena's hands moved faster now, the pulses sharper, more insistent. She leaned down, her ear close to the man's mouth. Another breath. Shallow, ragged, barely there, but real. Holy shit, Glenn breathed. The monitor beeped. Once, then again. A heartbeat, weak, irregular, the rhythm all wrong. But there. Lena sat back on her heels, her chest heaving, her hands still hovering over the man's body like she was afraid to let go. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just watched the monitor, counting the beats, making sure they kept coming. Get a line in him, she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. 2 wide-bore IVs, 18 gauge, saline bolus, run it wide open, and somebody call for an advanced unit with blood products. Now. Danny moved like lightning, grabbing supplies, his hands shaking as he worked. He fumbled the IV catheter once, cursed, got it on the second try. Glenn just stood there, staring at the monitor like it was displaying something impossible. That's not possible, he muttered. That's not medically possible. Lena looked up at him, her expression flat and unreadable. It is if you know how. The man's chest rose again, this time slower, but stronger. His eyes fluttered beneath closed lids. His fingers twitched. A small movement, but unmistakable. Around them, the other medics were starting to gather, drawn by the commotion. Whispers spread like wildfire. He was dead. Flatlined for 20 minutes. How did she... What did she do? Lena ignored them all. She leaned down, close to the man's ear. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. Stay with me. You're not done yet. Do you hear me? You're not done. His eyelids cracked open, just a sliver. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His eyes couldn't focus yet. She squeezed his hand. Don't try to talk, just breathe. That's all you have to do right now. Just keep breathing. His fingers closed weakly around hers. The advanced life support unit arrived 6 minutes later, rolling in with a full team and a mobile ICU setup. By then, the man, they'd pulled his wallet, found his ID, learned his name was Michael Reeves, had a pulse of 72 beats per minute, blood pressure stabilizing at 90/60, pupils reactive to light. The paramedics loaded him onto their stretcher, still staring at Lena like she'd just performed an exorcism. One of them, a woman named Karen with 15 years of experience, stopped beside Lena. What did you do? Lena was packing up her gear, hands still trembling slightly. Standard resuscitation. Bullshit. I've been doing this for 15 years. That wasn't standard anything. Lena didn't look at her. He's alive. That's what matters. Where did you learn that technique? No answer. Lena, he needs to get to Riverside Medical, Trauma Bay, full workup. Possible internal bleeding, definite crush injuries. Move. Karen held her gaze for another moment, then turned and jogged back to her rig. They loaded Michael in, closed the doors, and pulled away with lights and sirens blazing. Glenn pulled Lena aside as the ambulance disappeared around the corner. His face was a mix of confusion and something that looked almost like suspicion. Where did you learn that? She didn't answer, just kept checking her supplies, reorganizing her pack. Lena, that wasn't standard procedure. That wasn't even close. What the hell was that? She finally met his eyes. Does it matter? Yeah, it matters. Because if you've got some kind of technique that can bring people back from the dead, the rest of us need to know about it. We need to be able to do it too. She turned away, started walking back toward the rig. It's not something you can teach. Bullshit. Everything can be taught. I don't care how complicated it is. She stopped, looked back at him over her shoulder. Her voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. Not this. Why not? She didn't answer, just turned and kept walking. Glenn stood there, jaw clenched, hands balling into fists at his sides. He watched her disappear into the crowd of emergency personnel, her figure swallowed by smoke and dust. What the hell are you hiding, Cross? He muttered to himself. By nightfall, the whole incident site was buzzing with the story. It spread through the crews like a virus. The medic who wouldn't give up, the impossible save, the 20-minute resurrection. People who hadn't even been there were talking about it. The story got bigger with each telling. Lena sat in the back of the rig, alone, staring at her hands. They were still shaking. Not from exhaustion, though she was exhausted. Not from adrenaline, though that was still coursing through her veins. From memory. She'd used that technique exactly 4 times before. All of them in places that didn't officially exist. All of them in situations where quitting meant everyone died and the mission failed and bodies got left behind in the sand. She'd sworn she'd never use it again. When she'd left that life, when she'd walked away from the uniform and the clearance and the operations that never made it into any official record, she'd told herself she was done. No more war zones, no more impossible choices, no more techniques that weren't in any civilian medical textbook. But when she'd seen Michael Reeves lying there, crushed and broken, his life draining into the rubble, something in her had snapped. The same thing that always snapped when she saw someone written off too soon, declared unsalvageable before every option had been exhausted. She closed her eyes, took a slow breath, tried to push the memories back down where they belonged. Across the city, in a hospital bed at Riverside Medical Center, Michael Reeves opened his eyes for the first time since the collapse. The room was bright, too bright. Machines beeped around him. His whole body hurt in ways he didn't have words for. A nurse noticed immediately, rushed over. "Mr. Reeves, can you hear me?" He tried to nod, managed a small movement of his head. "Don't try to move. You've been through major trauma. You're in the ICU. You're safe." His lips moved, The nurse leaned closer. Who? His voice was barely a whisper, raw and broken. Who was she? The nurse smiled, relief flooding her face. The one who saved you? Her name's Lena Cross. She's a paramedic with Ashford Emergency Services. She didn't give up on you when everyone else did. He nodded slightly, his eyes already closing again from exhaustion. But before he slipped back under, he whispered, Tell her, thank you. The nurse promised she would, but by morning, that thank you would turn into something else entirely. Because the hospital administrator, Richard Kelso, had already started making calls. He'd pulled the incident report, read through the timeline, seen the notes about extended resuscitation efforts far beyond standard protocol, and he'd started asking questions. Questions about liability, questions about risk, questions about a civilian paramedic who'd kept working a code long past acceptable limits, using techniques that weren't in any approved training manual. Kelso had made his career on avoiding lawsuits, on managing risk, on making sure the hospital never got caught in situations where lawyers could sink their teeth in. And Lena Cross, whether she knew it or not, had just become a problem. By 8 the next morning, he'd already contacted the Emergency Medical Services Director. By 9, he'd filed a formal inquiry. By 10, the review board was scheduling a hearing, one where Lena Cross would have to explain, in detail and under oath, exactly what she'd done, and where she'd learned to do it. Meanwhile, Lena was at home, sitting at her kitchen table, drinking coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the rubble, back in the sand, back in places where the rules were different and the stakes were absolute. Her phone buzzed. A text from Danny. You okay? She stared at it for a long moment, then typed back. Fine. People are talking. Let them. Glenn's asking questions. She didn't respond to that one. Another buzz, this time from a number she didn't recognize. This is Glenn Thorne. We need to talk. Call me. She deleted it without responding, but she knew he wasn't going to let it go. None of them were. She'd crossed a line yesterday, and now people wanted to know why. They wanted explanations. They wanted her secrets. And the worst part was, she couldn't give them what they wanted. Not without opening doors that needed to stay closed. Not without dredging up a past that was supposed to be buried. She set the phone down, finished her cold coffee, and stared out the window at the city waking up around her. Somewhere out there, Michael Reeves was alive because she'd refused to quit. That was supposed to be enough. That was supposed to be the whole point. But she had a sinking feeling that it was only the beginning. 3 days later, the official summons arrived. Lena was on shift, running a routine transfer, an elderly woman from a nursing home to the hospital for dialysis, when her supervisor flagged her down at the station. Cross, you've got mail from the brass. He handed her an envelope, official letterhead, sealed. She opened it right there, scanned the contents. Formal review hearing. Monday, 9 a.m. Regarding incident response at the Harlow Center collapse, specifically prolonged resuscitation efforts on patient Michael Reeves. Required attendance. Prepare to provide detailed account of actions and justification for deviation from standard protocols. Danny was watching from across the room. What is it? She folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope. Nothing. Lena, it's nothing. Drop it. But her hands were shaking again. That night, she got a call from a number she hadn't heard from in 6 years. She almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail. But something made her pick up. Cross. The voice on the other end was rough, familiar, like gravel and old cigarettes. Colonel Marcus Webb. Retired now, but he'd been her commanding officer for 2 of her 3 deployments. Sir. The word came automatically, muscle memory. Heard you made some noise in Ashford? She didn't respond. Use the thoracic pulse sequencing, didn't you? Her jaw tightened. How did you? I still have friends in places. Word gets around when someone pulls off a 20-minute revival, especially using a technique that's not supposed to exist outside of classified medical units. I did what I had to do. I know, and now you're going to pay for it. His voice softened, just slightly. They're going to come after you, Lena. The bureaucrats, the administrators, the liability lawyers. They're going to want to know where you learned it. And if you tell them the truth, you'll open a door you can't close. I know. So what are you going to do? She stared at the wall, at nothing. I don't know. You've got three options. 1, you lie, tell them you improvised, got lucky, can't replicate it. They'll slap your wrist, maybe suspend you, but you'll survive. 2, you tell the truth and deal with the fallout. That means breaking your NDA, possibly criminal charges, definitely the end of your career. 3, you let me make a call. She closed her eyes. No. Lena, I left that world, sir. I'm not going back. I'm not asking you to go back. I'm offering to run interference. 1 call to the right person, this whole thing goes away. And what do I owe in return? Silence on the other end. Then, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. That's what I thought. No thanks. You're making a mistake. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. She hung up before he could respond. Then she sat there in the dark, phone still in her hand, and tried to figure out how the hell she was going to explain the unexplainable without destroying everything she'd built in the 6 years since she'd walked away from the only life she'd ever known. The hearing was 4 days away, and she still had no idea what she was going to say. The morning of the hearing, Lena woke at 4:30 to rain hammering against her window. She hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of a gray space where memories bled into nightmares, and she couldn't tell which was which. She got up, showered in cold water to shock herself awake, and dressed in the only professional clothes she owned: black slacks, white button-down, a blazer she'd bought for her mother's funeral 3 years ago and never worn since. By 6, she was sitting at her kitchen table with a mug of black coffee, staring at the stack of documents she'd printed out. Incident reports, protocol manuals, her own personnel file requested through official channels 2 days ago. Everything was in order, everything was documented, except for the one thing that mattered. She still didn't know what she was going to say when they asked the question. Where did you learn that technique? She'd rehearsed a dozen different answers. None of them felt right. Most of them were lies, and she'd never been good at lying. The rest were half-truths that would only invite more questions. At 7:15, her phone rang. Danny. You want a ride? He asked. No preamble. I'm good. Lena, you shouldn't go in there alone. I'm not bringing you into this. I'm already in it. I was there. I saw what you did. She rubbed her eyes. Danny, I'm picking you up in 20 minutes. Be ready. He hung up before she could argue. 20 minutes later, she was in the passenger seat of his beat-up Honda, watching the city blur past through rain-streaked windows. Neither of them spoke for the first 10 minutes. Finally, Danny broke the silence. What are you going to tell them? The truth. Which version? She didn't answer. Lena, if there's something I should know, something that's going to come out in there, I'd rather hear it from you first. She looked at him. He kept his eyes on the road, jaw tight. He was worried, actually worried. That almost made it worse. I was military, she said quietly. Before this? Before Ashford. I was a combat medic. He nodded slowly. Okay, that's not a crime. It wasn't regular military. He glanced at her, then back at the road. Special operations? Something like that. And that's where you learned the technique. Yeah. Can you tell them that? No? Why not? Because it's classified. Because I signed papers that say I can't talk about it. Because even admitting it exists could land me in federal prison. Danny was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, So you're screwed. Pretty much. What happens if you refuse to answer? They'll assume I'm hiding something, which I am. They'll probably suspend me pending further investigation. And if they dig deep enough, they'll find things that are going to raise a lot more questions. Oh, like what? She didn't answer that one. They pulled into the parking lot of the administrative building at 8:40. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. Lena sat there for a moment, staring at the glass doors, feeling the weight of what was coming. You don't have to do this, Danny said. You could walk away, find another job, another city. And let them win? Who's them? Everyone who thinks protocol matters more than saving lives. Danny shook his head. That's not what this is about. They're scared, Lena. You did something they can't explain, and it makes them look bad. So they're going to try to tear you down to make themselves feel better. That's how this works. She opened the door. Then let them try. The hearing room was on the third floor, a sterile conference space with fluorescent lights and a long table where 5 people sat waiting. Lena recognized 3 of them. Richard Kelso, the hospital administrator, sat in the center, mid-50s, gray suit, expression like he'd been sucking on lemons. To his left was Dr. Patricia Nguyen, head of emergency services at Riverside Medical, sharp-eyed and stone-faced. To his right was Captain Briggs, the fire department incident commander, still looking pissed off about being overruled at the scene. The other 2 were strangers. A woman in her 40s with short blonde hair and a legal pad covered in notes, and a man in his 60s, military posture, wearing a suit that was just expensive enough to signal federal. Lena's stomach dropped. She took a seat across from them. Danny sat beside her, uninvited but unbothered. Kelso frowned at him. "Mr. Ortega, this is a closed hearing." "I was on scene," Danny said flatly. "I'm a witness." "You weren't called." "I'm calling myself." Kelso's jaw tightened, but he didn't push it. He turned his attention to Lena, shuffling papers in front of him. "Ms. Cross, thank you for coming. Didn't realize I had a choice." "You don't." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let's get started. This is a formal review of your actions on Tuesday, April 27th, during the Harlow Center collapse response. Specifically, your decision to continue resuscitation efforts on Michael Reeves for approximately 22 minutes after initial cardiac arrest, well beyond standard protocols." Lena said nothing. "For the record," Kelso continued, "we're not here to punish you. We're here to understand what happened and ensure that our emergency response procedures are being followed correctly. This is about accountability and patient safety." "Patient's alive," Lena said. "Seems pretty safe to me." Dr. Nguyen leaned forward. "Ms. Cross, I've reviewed the medical records from Mr. Reeves's admission. His recovery has been remarkable. Minimal brain damage, full neurological function restored, stable vitals. By all accounts, he should be dead or vegetative. Instead, he's expected to make a full recovery." "Good." "It is good. It's also highly irregular. The techniques you used aren't part of any standard training curriculum that I'm aware of. So the question we're trying to answer is, where did you learn them?" There it was, the question she'd been dreading. Lena met the doctor's eyes. "Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters," Kelso cut in. "If you've developed a technique that can save lives in situations we'd otherwise consider hopeless, we need to know about it. We need to be able to teach it, replicate it, integrate it into our protocols. And if I can't teach it, then we need to know why not." The blonde woman spoke for the first time, her voice cool and precise. "Ms. Cross, my name is Jennifer Aldridge. I'm with the State Medical Board. One of the concerns raised in this review is that you may have received training outside of accredited civilian medical programs. Is that accurate?" Lena felt Danny tense beside her. "I'm a licensed paramedic," she said carefully. "I've completed all required certifications." "That's not what I asked." "Then maybe you should ask a clearer question." Aldridge's expression didn't change. "Have you received medical training from non-civilian sources?" The room went very quiet. Lena glanced at the man in the expensive suit. He was watching her with the kind of stillness that came from years of practice. "Federal. Definitely federal. The question was which agency." "I'm not required to disclose my employment history beyond what's relevant to my current position," Lena said. "You are if it pertains to this investigation," Kelso shot back. "Then maybe you should clarify what you're investigating, because last I checked, saving someone's life wasn't a violation." Captain Briggs spoke up, his voice rough. "You disobeyed a direct order at an active emergency scene. You refused to follow protocol. You put yourself and others at risk by staying in an unstable collapse zone longer than necessary. Those are violations, Cross." "I put myself at risk, nobody else." "You tied up resources that could have been used elsewhere." "And I saved a man's life that you'd already written off." "That's not your call to make." Lena's voice stayed level. "Then whose call is it? Yours? The protocol manual? The insurance adjusters who decide how much effort is cost-effective?" She leaned forward. "I was there. I assessed the situation. I made a judgment call. And I was right." "You got lucky," Briggs snapped. "No, I knew what I was doing." "Then prove it. Show us, teach us. If this technique is real, demonstrate it. I can't. Why not? Because it's not something you learn from a PowerPoint presentation. It takes years of training in conditions you can't replicate in a civilian setting. Dr. Nguyen's eyes narrowed. What kind of conditions? Lena didn't answer. The federal agent finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying weight. Ms. Cross, my name is David Harmon. I'm with the Department of Defense, Office of Medical Research. I'm here as an observer, not as part of this review board, but I'd like to ask you a question, if you don't mind. Everything in Lena screamed danger. She kept her expression neutral. Go ahead. Have you ever worked with the Joint Special Operations Medical Training Center at Fort Bragg? Danny's head whipped toward her. No, Lena said. It wasn't technically a lie. She'd never worked with that specific facility. She'd worked with something else entirely, something that didn't have an official name or address. Harmon watched her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Understood. But his eyes said he knew she was dancing around the truth. Kelso shuffled his papers again, clearly losing patience. Ms. Cross, let me be direct. We can't allow paramedics to operate outside established protocols based on secret training we can't verify. It opens us up to enormous liability. So either you explain where you learned this technique and allow us to evaluate its legitimacy, or we have no choice but to conclude that your actions were reckless and remove you from active duty pending further investigation. You're threatening to fire me for saving someone's life. We're protecting the integrity of our emergency response system. You're covering your ass. Kelso's face went red. That's enough. No, it's not. Lena stood up. You want to know the truth? Fine. I learned that technique in places you've never heard of, doing things you don't want to know about. I can't teach it because it requires training that doesn't exist in the civilian world. And I can't tell you more than that because I signed documents that say, if I do, I go to prison. So you've got a choice. You can accept that I saved Michael Reeves using methods you don't understand and can't replicate, or you can fire me and explain to his family why you're punishing the person who brought him back from the dead. Either way, I'm done answering questions. She turned and walked toward the door. If you leave this room, you're suspended immediately, Kelso called after her. She stopped, hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. Effective immediately, you're placed on administrative leave without pay, pending the outcome of this investigation. You're to surrender your credentials and equipment by end of business today. You're prohibited from responding to any emergency calls or representing yourself as a paramedic until further notice. Do you understand? Lena looked back over her shoulder. Crystal clear. Then she walked out. Danny caught up with her in the stairwell. Lena, wait. Don't. You just torched your career in there. I know. So what now? She kept walking down the stairs through the lobby out into the rain. Danny followed, getting soaked, not caring. Lena, talk to me. She stopped on the sidewalk, rain running down her face. Go back to work, Danny. Forget this happened. Not a chance. I'm serious. They're going to come after everyone associated with me. You don't want to be on that list. Too late. I'm already on it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Whatever you're hiding, whatever you did before you came here, I don't care. You saved that man's life. That's all that matters to me. She wanted to believe that. She really did. But she'd seen how fast loyalty evaporated when the truth came out. When people realized what you'd done, what you'd been part of, what you'd seen and chosen not to talk about. You should care, she said quietly. Because if they keep digging, they're going to find things that'll make you wish you'd never met me. She turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the rain. By that afternoon, the story had leaked. Local news picked it up first. Paramedics suspended after controversial life-saving effort. By evening, it had spread to regional outlets. By the next morning, it was trending on social media, and the narrative had split into two camps. One side hailed her as a hero who'd refused to give up when everyone else had quit. The other called her a reckless maverick who'd ignored safety protocols and put people at risk. Lena watched it unfold from her apartment, phone turned off, blinds drawn. She didn't read the comments, didn't watch the interviews, didn't respond to the reporters who'd somehow found her address and were camped outside her building. On the third day, Michael Reeves gave an interview from his hospital bed. Lena didn't want to watch it, but Danny texted her the link with a single word. Watch. She pulled it up on her laptop. Michael looked weak but alert, sitting propped up against pillows, his wife beside him. The reporter was asking about the collapse, about his injuries, about his recovery. He answered in short sentences, still getting his strength back. Then the reporter asked, "What do you want to say to the paramedic who saved you, Lena Cross?" Michael's expression changed. His eyes got wet. "I want to say thank you. I want to say that she's the reason I'm alive, the reason I get to see my kids grow up, the reason I get to wake up next to my wife every morning." His voice broke. "They're trying to punish her for saving my life. That's insane. She's a hero, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure she gets her job back." His wife squeezed his hand, nodding, tears streaming down her face. The interview ended. Lena closed the laptop. Her phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on an hour ago, and the messages had been flooding in ever since. Most of them were supportive, colleagues, former patients, people she barely knew offering encouragement, but some were hostile. Accusations of grandstanding, questions about her past, demands for transparency. One message stood out, from a blocked number. "They're not going to let this go. You need backup. Call me." No name, but she knew who it was. She deleted the message. The next day, something shifted. An anonymous source leaked documents to a local investigative journalist. Documents that showed Richard Kelso had previously attempted to silence 2 other medical professionals who'd questioned hospital protocols. Both cases had been settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements and payouts. The story exploded. Within hours, Kelso was being called in front of the hospital board to explain himself. Lena watched the coverage with a growing sense of unease. Someone was moving pieces on the board. Someone with access and resources and a very specific agenda. Her phone rang. Blocked number again. This time she answered. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Colonel Webb said without preamble. "I didn't ask for your help." "You don't have to. You're one of mine. That means I don't leave you hanging. I'm not one of yours anymore. That's not how this works, and you know it." His voice softened slightly. "Lena, I respect what you're trying to do. Building a life outside the wire, staying clean, keeping your head down. But sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. And when it surfaces, you need people who understand. I don't want your help. Then you're a fool. Because right now, you've got federal attention, media scrutiny, and a review board that's going to keep digging until they find something. And they will find something, Lena. Your cover's good, but it's not airtight, you know that." She closed her eyes. "What do you want?" "I want to make this go away. I can do that. One call, and Kelso backs off. The review board closes the case. You get your job back, your life back. Everything goes back to normal. And in exchange, we'll talk about that later." "No, we'll talk about it now, or we don't talk at all." Webb sighed. "There's a situation developing. Overseas. Medical support team needed for a recovery operation. 3 weeks, maybe 4. High risk, high value target. They need someone with your skill set." "I'm out. I told you that 6 years ago." "I know what you told me. I'm telling you the world doesn't care. You've got skills that save lives in places where nobody else can. That matters. Find someone else." "There is nobody else. Not with your experience, not with your training." "Then you're out of luck." Lena, she hung up. Her hands were shaking again. She set the phone down, stared at it like it might explode. She'd meant what she said. She was done with that life, done with the missions that didn't exist, the operations that got erased from the record, the bodies that never made it home. She'd given 6 years to that world, and it had taken pieces of her she'd never get back. But Webb was right about one thing. The past didn't stay buried, not when you'd left fingerprints all over it. That night, she got a visitor. The knock came at 9:15. She wasn't expecting anyone. She checked the peephole, saw a man in his 30s, suit and tie, holding an ID wallet up to the door. FBI. Her stomach dropped. She opened the door but left the chain on. "Lena Cross?" the man asked. "Who's asking?" "Special Agent Ryan Torres, FBI. I need to ask you a few questions about your military service record." "I don't have to answer questions without a lawyer present." "You're not under investigation, Ms. Cross. I'm just trying to verify some information that's come across my desk." "Then verify it somewhere else." She started to close the door. He put his hand against it, not forcing it, just stopping it. "It's about a medical technique you used during an emergency response last week. a technique that appears in exactly one classified training manual, which was used by a unit that officially doesn't exist. I need to know how you accessed that training. Lena's heart was hammering, but she kept her voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. Miss Cross, I'm not trying to jam you up, but someone flagged your name in connection with a program that's been under federal review for the past 2 years. If you were part of that program, you may be entitled to veterans' benefits and medical care that you're not currently receiving. I'm trying to help you. I don't need help. Maybe not, but if you were part of Operation Nightingale, you're at risk for a lot of things the VA should be monitoring. PTSD, exposure to hazardous materials, long-term stress injuries. She felt the blood drain from her face. Nobody was supposed to know that name, nobody outside of the people who'd been there. I don't know what you're talking about, she repeated, but her voice came out wrong. Torres watched her carefully. Ms. Cross, I've spent the last 6 months trying to track down people who were part of that program. Most of them are dead. Suicide, mostly. A few accidents that don't look like accidents. The rest have disappeared so completely, it's like they never existed. You're the first one I've found alive and functioning. I'd really like to keep it that way. She stared at him through the gap in the door. I can't talk to you about this, she said finally. Can't or won't? Both. He nodded slowly, then pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it through the gap. If you change your mind, call me. Anytime, day or night. She took the card without looking at it. One more thing, Torres said. The people who ran Nightingale, they're still out there, still operational, and they don't like loose ends. If they think you're about to expose them, they'll come for you. So if you start feeling like you're being watched, if anything feels off, call me immediately. Understand? She nodded. He stepped back, gave her a small, sad smile, and walked away. Lena closed the door, locked it, and slid the chain back into place. Then she stood there, back against the wood, card clutched in her hand, trying to control her breathing. Operation Nightingale. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 6 years. It was supposed to be buried, erased, wiped from every database and record. But somehow, it was crawling back to the surface, and everyone who'd been part of it was ending up dead. She looked down at the business card, then at her phone, where Colonel Webb's blocked number still sat in her recent calls. For the first time since the hearing, she felt actual fear. Not of losing her job, not of the review board or the media or even federal prison. Fear that the thing she'd been running from for 6 years had finally caught up with her. And it wasn't going to stop until she was silenced. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table with the business card in front of her and a glass of whiskey she wasn't drinking. The card was simple. White stock, black text. Special Agent Ryan Torres, Federal Bureau of Investigation. A phone number. Nothing else. Operation Nightingale. She hadn't let herself think that name in years. Had trained herself to wall it off, compartmentalize it, shove it so far down that it couldn't surface during the quiet moments. But now it was right there, spoken aloud by a federal agent who somehow knew what wasn't supposed to be knowable. And he'd said most of the others were dead. She tried to remember names, faces. The medics she'd trained with, deployed with, bled alongside in places that had no names on any map. There'd been 12 of them in her rotation. Specialists pulled from various branches, all with spotless records and specific skill sets. They'd learned techniques that didn't exist in any textbook, practiced on training aids that simulated wounds no civilian would ever see, deployed to black sites where the rules were different and the stakes were absolute. She could remember 6 names clearly. The rest were blurry, faces without context. Were they really dead? All of them? Her phone buzzed. She nearly jumped out of her skin. Text from Danny. You awake? She stared at it for a long moment, then typed back. Yeah. Need to talk. Not over text. Can I come over? It's midnight, I know. This can't wait. She hesitated, then sent her address. He showed up 20 minutes later, soaked from the rain that had started up again. She let him in, handed him a towel. He dried his face, his hair, then turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What happened? She asked. Kelso's out. Forced resignation, effective immediately. The hospital board held an emergency session tonight. They're opening a full investigation into his handling of staff complaints over the past 5 years. Lena blinked. How do you know that? Because Dr. Nguyen called me an hour ago. She wanted to make sure you heard it from someone on the inside before it hits the news tomorrow. Why would she call you? Because she knows I was there. She knows what you did. Danny stepped closer, lowering his voice. She also said the review board is being dissolved. New panel, new investigation. This time focused on whether you should be commended, not punished. Lena felt something cold settle in her chest. Who's pushing this? What do you mean? Kelso doesn't just get forced out overnight. The board doesn't reverse course this fast unless someone with serious weight is making calls. So who is it? Danny shook his head. I don't know. But whoever it is, they're on your side. That was exactly what worried her. She turned away, walked to the window, stared out at the rain-slicked street below. A car was parked across the way, engine off, windows dark. It hadn't been there when Torres left. Lena, this is good news, Danny said behind her. You're going to get your job back, maybe even a commendation. Why do you look like someone just died? Because someone's pulling strings, and people don't pull strings for free. Maybe they just think you deserve better. She turned back to face him. Nobody does anything just because it's right. There's always an angle, always a price. You really believe that? I know that. He studied her for a moment, then sighed. What happened to you? Before Ashford? Nothing that matters now. Bullshit. Something happened that made you this paranoid, this closed off. And it's the same thing that taught you how to bring people back from the dead. So maybe it does matter. She wanted to tell him. Part of her actually wanted to say it all out loud just to have one person know the truth. But the words wouldn't come. Because once you said them, you couldn't take them back. And Danny deserved better than to get dragged into the mess she'd been carrying for 6 years. Go home, she said quietly. Get some sleep. I'll figure this out. Lena, please. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her face stopped him. He nodded slowly, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. Then he paused, looked back. Whatever you're afraid of, you don't have to face it alone. You know that, right? She didn't answer. After he left, she watched the car across the street for another hour. It didn't move. Nobody got in or out. But she could feel eyes on her, even through the dark and the rain. At 2 a.m, her phone rang. Blocked number. She answered without saying anything. You're being watched, Colonel Webb said. Black sedan, Virginia plates, 2 occupants. They've been there since 2300 hours. I know. They're not mine. That made her stomach drop. Then whose are they? Best guess? The same people who've been cleaning up Nightingale loose ends. They're trying to figure out if you're a threat. And if they decide I am, then you disappear, same as the others. She closed her eyes. What do you want me to do? Get out of there. Tonight. I'll send a car in 20 minutes. We'll move you somewhere safe, somewhere they can't touch you. And then what? I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder? Better than spending the rest of your life in a shallow grave. She looked at the business card still sitting on her table. FBI. Federal protection. Torres had offered help. But could she trust him? Could she trust anyone? I need time to think, she said. You don't have time. They're making their move tonight. How do you know that? Because I've seen this play out 11 times already. They watch. They assess. They decide. Then they act. You've got maybe 6 hours before they come for you. Her hand tightened on the phone. I'm not running. Then you're dead. I've been dead before. I got better. Webb was silent for a moment. Then he said, very quietly, You're making a mistake, Lena, and this time I can't pull you out of it. I never asked you to. She hung up. Then she grabbed her go-bag from the closet, packed and ready, always packed and ready, a habit from the old days, and checked the contents. Cash. Fake ID. Burner phone. A Glock 19 with 3 magazines. She hadn't touched it in 3 years, but the weight was familiar, almost comforting. She loaded a magazine, chambered around, and set the gun on the table next to the whiskey glass. Then she sat down and waited. The car didn't move until 4:30. She watched through a crack in the blinds as 2 figures got out. Both men, both dressed in dark clothes, moving with the kind of efficiency that said military or contractor. They didn't approach the building directly. Instead, they split up. One heading toward the front entrance, the other disappearing around the side toward the fire escape. Classic entry pattern. Pincer movement. One draws attention, the other comes in quiet. Lena grabbed the Glock, moved away from the window, positioned herself behind the kitchen counter with a clear line of sight to both the front door and the window that led to the fire escape. Her heart was hammering, but her hands were steady. She'd done this before. Different country, different threat. But the mechanics were the same. Wait, assess, react. Footsteps in the hallway outside her apartment, slow, cautious. Then a pause at her door. Testing the lock, listening for movement inside. She controlled her breathing. Slow inhale through the nose, slow exhale through the mouth. The way they taught her. A soft scraping sound. Lock picks. They weren't even pretending to be official. The fire escape window rattled slightly, someone testing it from the outside. She shifted her aim toward the window, keeping the door in her peripheral vision. The lock on the door clicked. The handle turned. The window slid open. Everything happened in the span of 3 seconds. The door swung inward. A figure stepped through, silhouetted against the hallway light. At the same instant, the window opened wider and a second figure started climbing through. Lena's training took over. "Federal officer, on the ground now!" It was a bluff. She had no authority to say that, but it bought her a half second of hesitation. The man at the door froze. The one at the window kept coming. She fired, not at them, at the wall above the door frame. The shot was deafening in the small space, the muzzle flash bright enough to leave after images. Both men dropped immediately, hands going for weapons. "Next one's center mass," she shouted. "I don't miss." The man at the door raised his hand slowly. "Easy, easy. We're not here to hurt you." Funny way of showing it. Breaking into my home at 4 a.m. "We need to talk. You weren't answering your phone. So you picked my lock. Try the doorbell next time." The man at the window was slowly pulling himself back outside. The one at the door took a careful step back into the hallway, hands still raised. "Ms. Cross, we work for the same people you used to work for. We're here to help." "If you worked for the same people, you'd know I don't work for anyone anymore." "That's not how it works. You know that. Get out." "We can't do that." "Then I'll put the next round through your kneecap and explain to the cops that you broke into my apartment. Your call." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "This isn't over." "It is for tonight." He backed out, pulled the door closed. She heard footsteps retreating down the hall. The man at the fire escape was gone. She waited 5 minutes, gun still raised, listening for any sound of them coming back. When she was reasonably sure they'd actually left, she moved to the door, checked the peephole, then secured the deadbolt in the chain. Her hands were shaking now. Adrenaline dump, delayed reaction. She set the gun down, gripped the edge of the counter, and let herself breathe. They'd found her. Whoever they were, whatever was left of the program, they knew where she lived and they were willing to push. Which meant Webb had been right about one thing. She was running out of time. She picked up Torres's business card, stared at it for a long moment, then grabbed her phone and dialed. He answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. "Torres? It's Lena Cross. You said to call if anything felt off." "What happened?" "2 men just tried to break into my apartment. They said they worked for the same people I used to work for." Silence on the other end. Then, "Are you safe right now?" "For the moment." "Stay where you are. I'm sending a team to your location. Don't open the door for anyone except me. Understood?" "How will I know it's you?" "I'll call you from outside your door. Don't open it until you hear my voice on the phone and see me through the peephole. Can you do that?" "Yeah." "How armed are you?" "Armed enough." "Good. Stay that way. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He hung up. Lena grabbed the go bag, moved to a position where she could watch both the door and the window, and settled in to wait. The Glock was back in her hand, safety off, finger resting along the frame. 15 minutes felt like an hour. When her phone finally rang, she checked the caller ID, Torres, and answered. "I'm outside your door," he said. "Blue jacket, FBI credential in my left hand. Take a look." She moved to the peephole. He was there, exactly as described, holding up his ID wallet, where she could see the badge and photo. She unlocked the door, let him in. He had 3 other agents with him, 2 men, 1 woman, all wearing vests with FBI markings. They swept the apartment quickly, checked the fire escape, the closets, under the bed. Professional, efficient. Torres turned to her. Tell me exactly what happened. She ran through it. The car outside, the two men, the attempted entry, the warning shot. He listened without interrupting, his expression getting darker with every detail. When she finished, he said, "You fired a weapon inside city limits. That's going to be a problem. They broke into my apartment. I believe you, but we're going to need to document this properly. My team will photograph the scene, collect evidence, take your statement. This needs to be by the book." Fine. One of the other agents, the woman, nameplate reading Morrison, was examining the door lock. Pics, definitely. Clean work. These guys knew what they were doing. Torres turned back to Lena. You said they claimed to work for the same people you used to work for. Who did you used to work for, Ms. Cross? There it was, the question she'd been dodging for a week. She met his eyes. I can't answer that. Can't or won't. Both. I sign non-disclosure agreements. I break them. I go to federal prison. You know this. I also know those NDAs don't cover illegal activity. If the people you worked for are now trying to silence you, that changes things. Maybe. But until I know for sure who's pulling the strings, I'm not saying anything that could land me in a cell. Torres studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. But here's where we are. Someone is targeting former members of a classified program. At least 9 confirmed deaths in the past 18 months, all ruled suicides or accidents. You're number 10 on the list. And now they've escalated to direct action. That means we're running out of time to get ahead of this. What do you want from me? I want you to let me protect you. Witness protection, new identity, relocation. We can have you out of the state by noon. And then what? I spend the rest of my life hiding? You spend the rest of your life alive. That's not nothing. She shook her head. I'm not running. Then you're going to die. People keep telling me that. I'm still here. For how long? These people are professionals. They're not going to stop just because you got lucky once. It wasn't luck. He paused, reconsidered. No, I suppose it wasn't. But you can't fight an entire shadow program by yourself. Watch me, Morrison called from the window. Torres, you need to see this. They moved to the fire escape. She was pointing down at the alley below. Tire tracks, fresh. Looks like they had a vehicle staged for extraction. Torres leaned out, examined the marks, then pulled out his phone and took several photos. Get a cast of these. I want to know what we're looking for. He turned back to Lena. How much do you know about what happened to the others? Nothing. Until you showed up, I didn't even know they were dead. Then let me fill you in. 9 deaths, 7 ruled suicide, gunshot, hanging, overdose. 2 ruled accidental, car crash, house fire. But every single one had something in common. They all happened within 72 hours of someone making inquiries about their military service. Lena felt ice in her veins. What kind of inquiries? Varies. FOIA requests, medical records checks, benefits applications. Someone asking questions triggered a response, and that response was permanent. Who's making the inquiries? That's the question. We've traced some of them back to shell companies, but the trail goes cold fast. Whoever's running this operation knows how to cover their tracks. And you think I'm next because of the hearing. I think the hearing put you on the radar. The media attention made you visible, and visibility is dangerous when you're supposed to be invisible. She turned away, stared out the window at the city starting to wake up. Dawn was breaking, pale light filtering through the rain clouds. There's something else, Torres said quietly. The program you were part of, Nightingale, it wasn't just about advanced medical training. We found evidence of human experimentation. Off-book trials of experimental drugs, untested procedures, techniques that violated about a dozen international treaties. She didn't respond. The people running it knew they were crossing lines, and now that it's being investigated, they're eliminating anyone who could testify about what really happened. You understand what that means, right? You're not just a witness. You're evidence, living proof that the program existed. So they're going to kill me to protect their secrets. Unless we get you out of here first. She turned back to him. I have a better idea. I'm listening. You want to bring down whoever's running this? Then we don't hide. We go loud. We make so much noise that they can't silence me without exposing themselves. Torres frowned. That's extremely risky. Everything about this is risky. But if I disappear into witness protection, they win. The program stays buried. The people responsible walk away clean, and 9 people died for nothing. I'm not letting that happen. What are you proposing? I go public. I tell my story. Not the classified parts. I'm not stupid, but enough to make it clear that I was part of something, that other people died because of it, and that I'm not going quietly. Force them to respond in the open instead of in the shadows. They'll come after you harder. Let them. At least then we'll see them coming. Morrison looked at Torres. She's got a point. Right now they're operating in the dark. Shine a light on them, they have to change tactics. Torres rubbed his face, clearly torn. This could blow up in a lot of ways. The Bureau's not going to like it. Your former command definitely won't. And there's no guarantee it'll even work. It'll work. Because the one thing people like this can't stand is exposure. They're used to operating in the dark. Make them defend their actions in public, and they'll make mistakes. He was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he said, if we do this, we do it my way. Controlled disclosure. You don't say anything without running it past me first, and you stay under Bureau protection the entire time, non-negotiable. Deal. I'm serious, Ms. Cross. You step outside those parameters, you're on your own. I understand. He pulled out his phone, started making calls. Within an hour, Lena's apartment was a full-scale crime scene. FBI techs were photographing everything, collecting samples, documenting the attempted break-in. Torres coordinated with the local field office, arranged for a safe house, started drafting the public statement they'd release. By 10 that morning, Lena was in a federal building downtown, sitting across from a lawyer who specialized in whistleblower protection. By noon, the first reporter had been contacted. By 3, the story was breaking online. Former military medic claims cover-up in classified medical program. The article was careful. It didn't name Nightingale specifically. It didn't reveal classified information, but it laid out enough details to make it clear that something had happened, that people had died, and that Lena Cross was willing to testify about it. Within an hour, her phone was blowing up. Requests for interviews, threats from anonymous accounts, messages of support from people she'd never met, and one text from a blocked number. You just made a very big mistake. She showed it to Torres. He had it traced immediately, but the number was a burner. Untraceable. They're rattled, he said. That's good. Doesn't feel good. It will when we have them in handcuffs. But that night, lying in a safe house bed that wasn't hers, staring at a ceiling that wasn't familiar, Lena wondered if she'd just signed her own death warrant. The answer came faster than she expected. At 2 in the morning, her burner phone, the one only Torres and 2 other agents had the number for, rang. She answered, heart already racing, a voice she didn't recognize. Male, calm, almost friendly. Ms. Cross, we need to talk about your recent media appearance. Who is this? Someone who's trying to keep you alive. That press conference was a mistake. You've painted a target on yourself that we can't remove. Good. Let them shoot. They will, and they won't miss. But there's another option. I'm listening. You retract the statement. Say you were confused, traumatized, misremembering events. We'll provide documentation showing you've been under psychiatric care for PTSD. The story dies, you go back to your life, and everyone walks away. And if I don't? Then we can't protect you, not from what's coming. She sat up in bed, fully awake now. You're saying you're the good guys? I'm saying there are people who want this buried for legitimate reasons. National security, ongoing operations, lives that depend on certain information staying classified. You're threatening all of that. 9 people are dead, and hundreds more are alive because of the work that program did. You want to be the one who destroys that? I want the truth. The truth is complicated, and it's going to get a lot of people killed if you keep pushing. She thought about that, about the operations she'd been part of, the lives saved, the missions that succeeded because they had medical support in places nobody else could reach. But she also thought about the things they'd done, the experiments, the procedures that crossed lines, the people who'd been used without consent. I'm not backing down, she said. Silence on the other end. Then I'm sorry for what happens next. The line went dead. She immediately called Torres. He answered on the first ring. They just threatened me, she said, directly. Offered me a deal to retract everything. What did you say? I told them no. Good. That means we're getting close. They're scared. Or they're about to do something drastic. Either way, we're ready. You're in the safest location in the city. No one's getting to you. She wanted to believe that, but 3 hours later the fire alarms went off. The alarm was deafening, a piercing shriek that cut through the walls and rattled in her skull. Lena was out of bed before she'd fully processed it, muscle memory taking over. She grabbed the Glock from the nightstand, checked the chamber, and moved to the door. Through the crack underneath, she could see lights flashing in the hallway. Red strobes. Emergency protocol. She cracked the door open. The hallway was empty, but she could hear voices shouting from the stairwell, agents coordinating, boots pounding on concrete. The safe house was a 4-story building in a commercial district, disguised as an accounting firm. 6 other people inside, all FBI. Or at least they were supposed to be. Her phone buzzed. Torres. Stay in your room. Lock the door. Don't come out until I give the all clear. She texted back. What's happening? Fire alarm triggered on the 3rd floor. Could be malfunction. Could be a distraction. Stay put. She locked the door but didn't put the gun down. Instead, she moved to the window, looked out at the street below. 2 fire trucks were already pulling up, lights flashing. Fast response. Too fast for a random alarm. Someone had called it in before it even went off. Her phone rang. Not Torres, the blocked number from earlier. She answered, but didn't speak. Look across the street, the voice said. 3rd window from the left, 2nd floor. She shifted her position, looked where he'd indicated. A figure stood in the window, silhouetted against interior light, holding something. A rifle. We have a clean line of sight on your room, the voice continued. The fire alarm gets everyone moving, creates chaos, gives us the opening we need. You step into that hallway, you're done. Her grip tightened on the phone. So what? You called to gloat? I called to give you one last chance. Walk away from this. Retract the statement. Disappear. Or we end it right now. You won't shoot. Too many witnesses. You'd be surprised what we can get away with in the confusion. Single shot, suppressed. Everyone thinks it's structural damage from the fire. By the time anyone figures out what happened, we're gone. She stepped back from the window, out of the line of fire. What's stopping me from telling Torres about this right now? Nothing. But by the time he gets to that building, we'll be gone. And you'll still be a target. The difference is, if you cooperate, you get to live. If you don't, you become a statistic. I'll take my chances. She hung up and immediately called Torres. It rang 4 times before he picked up, breathing hard. Lena, I told you to stay in your room. There's a shooter across the street, 3rd window from the left, 2nd floor. They just called me. Dead silence. Then, how did they get this number? I don't know, but they're watching us right now. They triggered the alarm to flush people out. Stay away from the windows. I'm coming to you. The line went dead. She moved to the corner of the room farthest from the window and waited. Outside, she could hear the fire department setting up, radios crackling. Inside, footsteps in the hallway. Fast, purposeful. A knock on her door. Lena, it's Torres. Open up. She checked the peephole first. It was him, flanked by Morrison and another agent she recognized. She unlocked the door. Torres stepped inside, immediately positioning himself between her and the window. We're evacuating, right now. Fire department's protocol, and we're not arguing. But we're moving you through the back exit, not the front. They'll expect that. I know. That's why we're sending a decoy out the front. Morrison was already pulling a tactical vest from a bag, handing it to Lena. Put this on, and keep your head down. They moved fast. Torres led the way, 2 agents behind Lena, 1 more bringing up the rear. They took the back stairwell, narrow, concrete, lit by emergency lights. The alarm was even louder here, echoing off the walls. At the ground floor, Torres held up a fist. Everyone stopped. He cracked the exit door, peered out. Then he pulled back and spoke into his radio. Team 2, initiate decoy protocol. We're moving in 30 seconds. Through the crack in the door, Lena could see the back alley. A vehicle was idling there. Black SUV, windows tinted, engine running. The driver was visible through the windshield, scanning the area. That's ours, Torres said quietly. On my mark, we move fast. Straight to the vehicle, don't stop for anything. He counted down on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. They burst through the door. Lena was halfway to the SUV when she heard the shot. Not from across the street, from the rooftop above them. The round hit the pavement 2 feet to her left, concrete exploding in a small crater. Morrison grabbed her arm, yanked her forward. Move! Another shot, this one closer. They reached the SUV, piled in. The driver floored it before the doors were even closed, tires screaming as they peeled out of the alley. Lena looked back through the rear window. A figure on the rooftop, repositioning. Another shot cracked through the air, but they were already turning the corner out of sight. Torres was on his radio, barking orders. We've got shots fired, sniper on the roof. Lock down the perimeter. I want that building cleared and the shooter apprehended. Now. They drove for 20 minutes, switching vehicles twice, taking random turns to shake any potential tail. Finally, they pulled into an underground parking garage and stopped. Torres turned to Lena. You okay? I'm fine. Did you get the shooter? Team's sweeping the building now, but I'm guessing they're already gone. He pulled out his phone, checked messages, frowned. The building across the street, the one you said had the rifle, it's empty. Leaseholder's a shell company. No trace of anyone inside. How did they know where I was? That's the million-dollar question. He looked at Morrison. Run a full sweep of everyone with access to the safe house location. I want backgrounds, recent activity, financial records, everything. Morrison nodded and stepped out of the vehicle to make calls. Torres turned back to Lena. Someone on the inside gave you up. There's no other explanation. Someone in the FBI? Or someone with access to FBI systems? Either way, we've got a leak. And until we plug it, you're not safe anywhere. She leaned back against the seat, exhaustion finally catching up with her. So what now? Now we go on the offensive. You wanted to go public? We're going to take it further. I've got a contact at the Senate Intelligence Committee. If we can get you in front of them, testify under oath about what you saw in Nightingale, it becomes part of the congressional record. Can't be buried or erased. They'll fight it. Of course they will. But once it's on record, they have to respond. And every response is another thread we can pull. When? Tomorrow. I can have the hearing set up by noon if we move fast. Lena closed her eyes. Tomorrow. Less than 12 hours to prepare for the moment that would either expose everything or get her killed. Do it, she said. By dawn, they were in a new location. A hotel room booked under a fake name, paid for in cash. Torres had 2 agents stationed outside the door and another in the room next door. Morrison was working her contacts, digging into the leak. Lena sat at the small desk, writing out everything she could remember about Nightingale. Names, dates, locations, the procedures they'd learned, the experiments they'd witnessed. Every detail that wasn't directly classified but painted a picture of what had really happened. Her hand cramped after the first hour. She kept writing. Torres brought her coffee at 7. How's it coming? Slow. There's a lot to cover. You don't have to remember everything. Just enough to establish the foundation. Once you testify, investigators can follow up on the details. She looked up at him. You really think this is going to work? I think it's our best shot. Right now you're a target because you're a loose end. But if you become a public witness, killing you becomes exponentially harder. Too much attention. Too many questions. Or they decide the attention is worth it. He didn't argue with that. At 9, Morrison knocked on the door. Torres let her in. Her expression was grim. We found the leak, she said. David Harmon. Lena's stomach dropped. The DOD guy from the hearing? Yeah, he's not DOD. Well, he is, but he's also part of a special oversight unit that was created specifically to monitor Nightingale after it was officially shut down. He's been feeding information to someone higher up the chain. Who? Still working on that. But here's the interesting part. The unit he's with? It's supposed to be independent. But their funding comes from a black budget line that traces back to a defense contractor called Vanguard Solutions. Torres frowned. Never heard of them. That's because they don't exist on paper. Shell company, layers of corporate protection. But we tracked their board of directors, and guess who's listed as a silent partner? She pulled out her phone, showed them a photo. An older man, late 60s, distinguished, in a military dress uniform. Lena's breath caught. General Marcus Hale, Morrison said, Retired Army, former commander of Special Operations Command, also the officer who greenlit Operation Nightingale in the first place. Torres let out a low whistle. So he's cleaning up his own mess. Looks like it. He's got the connections, the resources, and the motivation. If Nightingale gets exposed, it doesn't just end careers. It ends his legacy. Maybe even lands him in prison. Lena stared at the photo. She'd never met Hale personally, but she'd heard the name. Everyone in the program had. He was the ghost in the machine, the one pulling strings from so far up the chain that you never saw his face. Can we prove it? She asked. Morrison shook her head. Not yet. But if you testify tomorrow, it'll force him to respond. And when he does, he'll make mistakes. Or he'll make me disappear before I can talk. That's why we're keeping you locked down until the hearing. No outside contact. No phone calls except on secured lines. You don't leave this room until we're walking into the Senate building. Lena looked at Torres. You're putting a lot of faith in the system. I'm putting faith in the fact that Hale can't kill a congressional witness in broad daylight without bringing down the entire house of cards. He's powerful, but he's not invincible. She wanted to believe that. At 11, her phone buzzed. The burner? The one only Torres and Morrison had the number for. Text from an unknown number. Congratulations on finding Hale. Now ask yourself, why did we make it so easy? She showed it to Torres. His face went pale. They wanted us to find him, he said slowly. Why? Because he's not the top. He's another layer, another distraction. Morrison pulled out her laptop, started typing furiously. If Hale's the public face, who's behind him? Who's actually running this? Torres paced the small room, thinking out loud. Vanguard Solutions, shell company. But shell companies need real people to operate. Financial transactions, legal filings, contracts. Someone had to sign the papers. Already on it, Morrison muttered. Give me 5 minutes. Lena stood up, moved to the window. The city sprawled out below, oblivious to the war being waged in the shadows. How many people out there had no idea that programs like Nightingale even existed? That people were being erased to protect secrets that should never have been kept? Got something, Morrison said. Vanguard's registration traces back to a law firm in D.C. Kellerman and Associates. They specialize in government contracts and classified work. And their senior partner is... She trailed off, eyes widening. Who? Torres demanded. Senator Elizabeth Granger, Armed Services Committee. The room went silent. She's on the committee that's supposed to be overseeing this, Torres said quietly. She's the one who would receive your testimony. Lena felt the floor drop out from under her. It's a trap. Not just a trap, a kill box. You walk into that hearing, you're putting yourself directly in front of the person who's been orchestrating the cleanup. She'll have control of the room, the narrative, the security. She can make you disappear and call it anything she wants. Morrison was already shutting down her laptop. We need to pull the plug, cancel the testimony, get her out of the city. But Lena was shaking her head. No. Lena, no, this is exactly what they want. We get scared, we run, we hide, and the story dies. Granger stays protected, Hale walks away clean, and 9 people died for nothing. Torres stepped in front of her. If you walk into that hearing, you're dead. You understand that, right? She's not going to let you testify. She'll have you killed the moment you step into that building. Then we don't play by her rules. We change the game. How? Lena's mind was racing, pieces falling into place. She's expecting me to show up quietly, under FBI protection, behind closed doors. A classified hearing where she controls who's in the room and what gets recorded. That's the protocol for classified testimony. Exactly. But what if it's not classified? What if I go public before the hearing, put everything out there, names, dates, locations? Make it so big that she can't sweep it under the rug. Morrison frowned. You'd be violating your NDA. That's federal prison. Only if they prosecute. And they won't prosecute if it means dragging everything into open court. The whole point of this operation is to keep it quiet. I make enough noise that they can't silence me without making it worse. Torres was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're talking about burning every bridge. There's no coming back from this. I know. The FBI can't protect you if you go rogue. You'll be on your own. I've been on my own before. He studied her face, looking for doubt. He didn't find any. What do you need? He asked finally. A press conference. Today. Every major outlet. I'll tell them everything that's not directly classified, enough to establish that Nightingale existed, that people died, and that powerful people are trying to cover it up. Then I'll announce that I'm testifying tomorrow in front of witnesses on the record. Granger won't be able to cancel it without raising red flags. She'll come after you harder. Let her. At least then everyone will be watching. Morrison looked at Torres. This is insane. Yeah, he agreed, but it might actually work. By 2 that afternoon, they'd assembled a press conference in a hotel ballroom downtown. Torres had called in every favor he had, contacted every reporter who'd been following the story. The room was packed. Cameras, microphones, journalists crammed shoulder to shoulder. Lena stood backstage, watching through a gap in the curtain. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the weight of what she was about to do. Danny appeared beside her. Torres had called him, told him what was happening. He'd come without hesitation. You sure about this? He asked quietly. No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's very you. She almost smiled. Torres appeared, earpiece in, coordinating with his team. We're ready. You walk out, make your statement, take maybe 5 questions, then we get you out. Security's tight, but we're exposed, so keep it short. She nodded. Lena, he said softer, once you do this, there's no taking it back. I know. He stepped aside. The curtain opened. Lena walked out into a wall of camera flashes and shouted questions. She moved to the podium, gripped the edges, and waited for the noise to die down. It took almost a minute. When the room finally quieted, she spoke. My name is Lena Cross. 6 years ago, I was a combat medic in a classified military program called Operation Nightingale. The program was designed to provide advanced medical support in black operations, missions that don't officially exist. We were trained in techniques that aren't taught in any civilian medical school, techniques that saved lives in situations where standard protocols would have failed. She paused. Let that sink in. But the program didn't just train us. It used us. We were subjected to experimental procedures, untested drugs, and scenarios that violated medical ethics and international law. We were told it was necessary, that the ends justified the means, that we were serving a greater good. Her voice hardened. 9 of my fellow medics are now dead. All of them died within the past 18 months. All of their deaths were ruled suicides or accidents. But I don't believe that. I believe they were silenced because they knew too much, because they were loose ends in a cover-up that reaches the highest levels of military and political power. The room exploded with shouted questions. She raised her hand, waited for quiet. Last week, I used one of those techniques to save a man's life during a building collapse. I was suspended for it, threatened with termination, subjected to a review board designed to discredit me. But what they were really trying to do was bury the questions I might raise about where I learned those techniques. She pulled out a folder, held it up. This contains documentation of my service in Nightingale, personnel records, training logs, medical reports. Some of it is still classified, so I can't share it all. But I'm making it available to congressional investigators, to the FBI, and to any journalist who wants to verify what I'm saying. She set the folder on the podium. Tomorrow, I will testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee about what I witnessed in Operation Nightingale. I will name names. I will provide evidence, and I will not be silenced. She looked directly into the nearest camera. To the people who are trying to bury this, you failed. The truth is out, and you can't kill it without destroying yourselves in the process. She stepped back from the podium. The room erupted, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, chaos spreading like wildfire. Torres grabbed her arm. Time to go. They moved fast, back through the curtain, down a service corridor into a waiting vehicle. The moment the doors closed, they were moving. Lena's phone started buzzing immediately. Messages flooding in, threats, support. News alerts showing her face on every major outlet. Torres was on his radio, coordinating with FBI teams. We need eyes on Granger. I want to know the second she makes a move. Morrison, in the front seat, turned back. CNN's already running with it. Whistleblower exposes secret military program. You're the top story. Good, Lena said. That's exactly what we need. Her burner phone rang. Blocked number. She answered. General Hale's voice. Older than she expected. Tired. Miss Cross, that was quite a performance. It wasn't a performance. It was the truth. Your truth, not the whole truth. You left out the part where Nightingale saved hundreds of lives, where the techniques we developed are still being used to keep soldiers alive in the field, where everything we did, every experiment, every risk, was in service of protecting this country. You can't protect the country by destroying the people who serve it. Sometimes you have to make hard choices. Choices that people like you will never understand because you're not the one making them. I understand perfectly. You sacrificed us to save your career. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You think going public protects you? It doesn't. It just changes the timeline. Senator Granger is very unhappy with you right now. And when she's unhappy, people tend to have accidents. Let her try. The whole world's watching now. The world has a short attention span, Miss Cross. Give it a week, and they'll have moved on to the next scandal. But you'll still be a target for the rest of your life. Then I guess I'll have to keep looking over my shoulder. Or you could disappear, quietly. We'll make it worth your while. New identity, new life, enough money to never have to work again. All you have to do is recant your testimony and vanish. Not a chance. Then you're a fool. Maybe. But I'm a fool who's still breathing. How long until you can say the same?" She hung up. Torres was staring at her. "Was that Hale?" "Yeah, tried to buy me off." "Did you record it?" "No. Burner phone, no recording capability." Damn, that would have been useful. They drove in silence for a while. Then Morrison's phone rang. She answered, listened, her expression darkening. "Understood. Keep me posted." She hung up, turned to Torres. "Granger's office just released a statement. She's calling for an immediate investigation into Lena's claims. Says she's deeply concerned about allegations of misconduct in classified programs and wants a full accounting." Lena laughed bitterly. "Of course she is. Covering her ass." "There's more. She's also requesting that the testimony be postponed pending a security review. Says she wants to ensure that no classified information is disclosed that could endanger ongoing operations." "She's trying to delay it," Torres said. "Buy time to figure out her next move." "Can she do that?" "She's the chair of the committee. She can do whatever she wants." Lena felt the trap closing. "So we just gave her the perfect excuse to shut me down." "Not if we move faster. Morrison, can you get us a meeting with the minority leader, someone not in Granger's pocket?" "I can try." "Do it. If we can get bipartisan support for the testimony, Granger can't block it without exposing herself." They spent the next 4 hours in a coffee shop, laptops out, phones ringing constantly. Morrison worked her contacts. Torres coordinated with FBI leadership. Lena reviewed her testimony notes, adding details, cross-referencing dates. At 7, Morrison got the call she'd been waiting for. "Senator Marcus Yee, Minority Leader, Armed Services Committee. He'll meet with us tonight, 9 o'clock, his office." Torres nodded. "That's our shot. Yee's been pushing for more oversight of classified programs. If we can convince him this is legitimate, he'll back us." They arrived at the Senate office building at 8:45. Security was tight, metal detectors, bag searches, ID checks. But Torres had credentials, and they were expected. Senator Yee's office was on the 3rd floor. His chief of staff met them at the door, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked like she hadn't slept in a week. "He's finishing another meeting. He'll be with you in 5 minutes. Wait here." They sat in the reception area, surrounded by photos of Yee with various dignitaries. Lena's knee bounced nervously. Danny, who'd insisted on coming, put a hand on her arm. "You've got this," he said quietly. The door opened. Senator Yee stepped out, early 60s, gray hair, kind eyes that had seen too much political warfare. He extended a hand. "Ms. Cross, thank you for coming." She shook his hand. "Thank you for seeing us, Senator." He gestured them into his office, closed the door. They sat around a small conference table. "I've been following your story," Yee said without preamble. "It's explosive. If even half of what you're claiming is true, it's one of the biggest scandals in military history." "It's all true, Senator." "Then help me understand. What do you need from me?" Torres leaned forward. "Senator Granger is trying to delay Miss Cross's testimony. We believe she's personally involved in the cover-up. If she succeeds in blocking the hearing, critical evidence will be buried and witnesses will continue to be silenced." Yi frowned. That's a serious accusation. Elizabeth Granger is a lot of things, but I've never known her to be corrupt. She's the senior partner in a law firm that represents the shell company funding the cleanup operation, Morrison said, sliding documents across the table. Vanguard Solutions. They've been paying to eliminate former Nightingale personnel. Yi picked up the documents, scanned them. His expression grew darker with each page. This is troubling, but it's circumstantial. You need more to make this stick. The testimony will provide more, Lena said. I can connect the dots between Nightingale, the cleanup operation, and the people running it, but only if I'm allowed to testify. Yi set down the documents. If I push for this hearing to proceed, Granger will fight back. Hard. And she's got allies. So do you, Torres said. Enough to force a vote? Make it public. Once it's on the record that she tried to block testimony about illegal medical experiments, her allies will scatter. Yi was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he said, I'll make some calls, but I need you to understand something, Ms. Cross. The moment you testify, your life changes permanently. You become a target for every conspiracy theorist, every partisan hack, every person with an agenda. They'll dig into your past, twist your words, try to destroy your credibility. Are you prepared for that? I don't have a choice, Senator. They're already trying to kill me. At least this way I go down swinging. He smiled slightly. Fair enough. I'll have an answer for you by morning. They shook hands and left. Outside on the steps of the building, Lena finally allowed herself to breathe. The night air was cold, sharp. The city lights spread out below like scattered stars. You did good in there, Danny said. We'll see. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. She opened it. A photo. Recent, taken from across the street. Lena standing on the Senate steps. Right now. The message below. Nice speech. Shame you won't live to give another one. She looked up, scanning the buildings across the street. Windows dark. No movement. But someone was watching. And they were close. Torres saw her face change and moved immediately. Get inside. Now! They rushed back through the doors into the building's marble lobby. Security looked up, startled, but Torres flashed his badge and kept moving. He pulled Lena into a side corridor, away from the windows. Show me, he said. She handed him her phone. He looked at the photo, his jaw tightening. They're here. Right now. Morrison was already on her radio. We need a perimeter sweep. All buildings with line of sight to the Senate steps. Someone's got eyes on us. Danny grabbed Lena's arm. How did they get your number again? I don't know. This is the third phone I've had in 2 days. Torres looked at Morrison. Check her for tracking devices. Phone, clothes, everything. Morrison pulled out a small handheld scanner, ran it over Lena's body. It beeped near her jacket pocket. She reached in, pulled out a tiny chip, no bigger than a grain of rice, embedded in the seam. Son of a bitch, Morrison breathed. GPS tracker. Military grade. When did they plant it? Lena asked. Could have been any time. The safe house, the hotel, the car. Doesn't matter. They've been following us the whole time. Torres crushed the chip under his heel. We need to move. Different location, different vehicle, complete blackout. No phones, no electronics, nothing they can trace. Where? Danny asked. Torres thought for a moment. I know a place. Off the books. Not even the Bureau knows about it. They moved through the building's basement, exited through a service tunnel that connected to a parking garage 3 blocks away. Torres had them wait while he swept the area, then brought around a civilian vehicle, an old Ford sedan that looked like it had seen better days. My personal car, he explained. No GPS, no tracking, no connection to the FBI. Get in. They drove for 40 minutes, taking random turns, doubling back, making sure they weren't followed. Finally, they pulled up to a small house in a residential neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Quiet, unassuming, the kind of place you'd never look twice at. Torres parked in the garage, closed the door behind them. My uncle's place. He's in Florida for the winter. No one knows I have access to it. Inside, the house was dated but clean. Furniture from the 70s, floral wallpaper, the smell of old books. They gathered in the living room, curtains drawn, lights off. We've got maybe 12 hours before the hearing, Torres said, checking his watch. That's assuming Senator Yi comes through and Granger doesn't block it. And if she does, Lena asked, then we're out of options. You'll have to go into hiding for real. New identity, new life, everything. Lena shook her head. I'm not running, not after coming this far. Then you need to be ready for the possibility that tomorrow doesn't go the way we planned. Granger's cornered. Cornered people do desperate things. Morrison was setting up a laptop, routing through multiple VPNs to check secure communications. Got an email from Senator Yi's office. He's calling for an emergency session tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Full committee, both parties, open to the press. Torres leaned forward. Did Granger agree to it? She didn't have a choice. Yi got 12 other senators to co-sign the request. If she refuses, it looks like she's obstructing. She's backed into a corner. Good. That's what we want. But Lena wasn't so sure. A cornered animal was the most dangerous kind. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Morrison printed out documents from secure servers, evidence they'd gathered, testimony outlines, background on Nightingale. Torres coordinated with FBI teams who'd be providing security tomorrow. Danny made coffee and tried to get Lena to eat something. You need to keep your strength up, he said, handing her a sandwich. She took it, but couldn't bring herself to eat. Her stomach was too tight. What happens after tomorrow? She asked. Say I testify. Say everything comes out. Then what? Danny sat down across from her. Then you get your life back. Do I? Or do I just trade one kind of target for another? Best case, I'm a whistleblower. Worst case, I'm a traitor. Either way, I'm not a paramedic anymore. You saved Michael Reeves. You exposed a corrupt system. That counts for something. Does it? Or did I just blow up my entire life for nothing? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You remember what you told me? In the rig, after the collapse, you said your job was to save lives, not to follow protocol, not to make people comfortable, to save lives. Yeah. You're still doing that. Just on a bigger scale, you're saving the people who come after you, the ones who won't have to go through what you went through. She wanted to believe that, but all she felt was tired. At 6 a.m, Morrison's phone buzzed. She answered, listened, her face going pale. When? Where? Pause. Understood. We're on our way. She hung up, turned to Torres. It's Harmon, David Harmon, the DoD liaison. He's dead. Found in his apartment an hour ago. Single gunshot to the head, staged to look like suicide. Lena's chest tightened. They're cleaning house. Looks like it. He was the connection between Granger and the field teams. With him gone, the trail gets a lot harder to follow. Torres stood up, started pacing. They're making their move, taking out witnesses before the hearing. Who else is on the list? General Hale, Morrison said, but he's got private security, hard target. What about Kelso, the hospital administrator? He's already lawyered up, cooperating with investigators in exchange for immunity. Then he's next. We need to get him into protective custody immediately. Morrison made the call. While she coordinated, Lena pulled Torres aside. They're going to come after me today, at the hearing. You know that, right? I know. That's why we're going to have agents everywhere. Rooftops, hallways, inside the chamber. You won't be alone. They got to Harmon in his own apartment, with FBI watching. What makes you think they can't get to me? He met her eyes. Because you're not going to make it easy. You're going to walk in there, tell your story, and walk back out. And I'm going to be right next to you the entire time. She nodded, but the fear was still there. At 7:30, they left the house. Different car this time, Morrison's personal vehicle. Another untraceable civilian ride. They took a route that avoided highways, stuck to back roads, kept their speed normal. The city was waking up around them. Morning commuters. Coffee shops opening, people going about their lives with no idea what was about to unfold. They arrived at the Senate building at 8:15. Security had been tripled. Checkpoints at every entrance. K-9 units sweeping for explosives. Snipers on the roof. Torres walked Lena through the process. You'll be in a secure holding room until the hearing starts. Only authorized personnel allowed in. Once you're called, Morrison and I will escort you to the chamber. You'll sit at the witness table, give your statement, answer questions. Then we get you out. How long? Could be an hour. Could be 6. Depends on how many questions they have. They entered through a side entrance, bypassing the main security line. Torres showed credentials at 3 different checkpoints. Each time, guards examined Lena like she was carrying a bomb. The holding room was small, windowless, furnished with a table and 2 chairs. Morrison stayed with her while Torres coordinated outside. "You scared?" Morrison asked. "Terrified." "Good. Means you're taking it seriously." She paused. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Even if it gets me killed? Even then, some things are worth dying for." Lena wasn't sure she agreed, but she appreciated the sentiment. At 8:50, Torres came back in. "They're ready for you. Full committee. Press gallery packed. Cameras everywhere. This is going to be broadcast live." Her stomach dropped. "I didn't know it was going to be public." Yi insisted. Said transparency was the only way to ensure accountability. "You okay with that?" She took a breath. "Do I have a choice?" "Not really." They walked through a series of corridors, past offices and conference rooms, finally arriving at a set of large wooden doors. Through them, Lena could hear voices, murmured conversations, the rustling of papers, cameras clicking. Torres stopped her just outside. "Remember, stick to what you know. Don't speculate. Don't get baited into arguments. Just tell the truth." She nodded. Morrison squeezed her shoulder. "You've got this." The doors opened. The chamber was enormous. Tiered seating for senators, a gallery for press and public, ornate wood paneling that spoke of power and history. Every seat was filled. Cameras lined the back wall. Lena could feel hundreds of eyes on her as she walked to the witness table. Senator Yi sat at the center of the committee bench. To his left was Senator Granger, perfectly composed, her expression neutral, but her eyes hard as flint. Yi banged the gavel. "This hearing will come to order. We are gathered today to hear testimony regarding allegations of misconduct in a classified military medical program known as Operation Nightingale. Miss Lena Cross, please stand and raise your right hand." She stood. Her legs felt weak, but she locked her knees and raised her hand. "Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." "Please be seated." She sat. The room fell silent. Yi leaned forward. "Ms. Cross, thank you for coming forward. I know this wasn't an easy decision. Please, in your own words, tell us what you experienced in Operation Nightingale." She took a breath and began. She told them about the recruitment, how she'd been pulled from her regular unit, vetted for months, then offered a position in a program that promised to save lives in the most extreme circumstances. She told them about the training, techniques that pushed the boundaries of medical science, procedures that weren't in any textbook, methods that worked but came at a cost. She told them about the deployments, the black sites, the missions that never officially happened, the people they saved and the people they couldn't. And then she told them about the experiments. "We were test subjects," she said, her voice steady despite the anger rising in her chest. "They told us it was voluntary, that we were helping advance military medicine, but we didn't have full information. We didn't know what we were being exposed to. And when people started having adverse reactions, they were quietly reassigned, or discharged, or worse." Granger spoke for the first time, her voice cool and professional. "Ms. Cross, these are serious allegations. Do you have any evidence to support them?" Lena reached into her folder, pulled out medical records. "These are my own blood work results from my time in the program. You'll notice unusual markers here, here, and here. Compounds that aren't standard vaccinations. Experimental drugs that were never approved for human use." She slid the documents across the table. An aide collected them, distributed copies to the committee. Granger examined them, her expression unchanging. "These could be anything. Medical records can be misinterpreted by people without proper training. Then have them analyzed by independent experts. I'm sure they'll confirm what I'm saying." Yi intervened. "Ms. Cross, you mentioned that 9 of your fellow program participants have died. Can you provide names?" She listed them. Each name felt like a stone in her chest. People she'd known. People she'd trusted. People who were gone. "And you believe these deaths were not accidental or self-inflicted?" "I know they weren't. They died because they knew too much, because they were witnesses to things that powerful people want to keep buried." Granger leaned back in her chair. "Ms. Cross, you're making extraordinary claims. Conspiracy. Murder. cover-ups reaching the highest levels of government, but you've provided no concrete evidence connecting these deaths to any specific individual or organization. That's because the people responsible have spent years erasing the evidence, but it's still there if you know where to look. Where should we look? Lena met her eyes. Start with Vanguard Solutions, the shell company that's been funding the cleanup operation. Then trace its connections to Kellerman and Associates, the law firm that represents them. Granger's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Fear. Are you accusing me of something, Ms. Cross? I'm saying there are connections that deserve investigation, and I'm confident that once investigators start pulling that thread, the whole thing will unravel. The room erupted in whispers. Cameras flashed. Reporters were already typing on their phones, sending out breaking news alerts. Yi banged his gavel. Order. We will have order. He turned to Granger. Senator, do you have any connection to the entities Ms. Cross just mentioned? Granger's jaw tightened. I will not dignify these baseless accusations with a response. This hearing has become a witch hunt, and I will not participate in it. She stood up, gathered her papers. Senator Granger, you are still under oath. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I will not answer any further questions without counsel present. The room exploded, senators shouting, reporters surging forward, cameras everywhere. Granger walked out, her staff scrambling to follow. Yi banged the gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. It took 3 minutes before the chaos subsided enough for him to speak. We will take a 15-minute recess. When we return, we will continue with Ms. Cross's testimony. This hearing is not over. They recessed. Lena sat at the table, shaking. Torres appeared beside her. You just took down a United States senator on live television, he said quietly. Is that good or bad? It's unprecedented. She invoked the Fifth. That's as good as an admission of guilt in the court of public opinion. Morrison rushed over, phone in hand. The media is going insane. Every outlet is running with this. Granger's office is getting flooded with calls. And the FBI just announced they're opening a formal investigation into Vanguard Solutions and its connections to sitting members of Congress. Lena felt dizzy. It's really happening. Yeah, it is. The hearing reconvened. Granger's seat was empty. Yi addressed the committee. In light of Senator Granger's refusal to answer questions, I am formally calling for her recusal from this committee, pending the outcome of the FBI investigation. All in favor? Every hand went up except 3, Granger's closest allies, who looked like they wanted to disappear. Motion carries. Senator Granger is hereby removed from her position as chair of this committee, effective immediately. The gavel came down like a gunshot. Lena's testimony continued for another 2 hours. She answered every question they threw at her about the program, the training, the experiments, the deaths. Some senators were sympathetic. Others were skeptical, but all of them were listening. By the time Yi finally adjourned the hearing, Lena was exhausted. Her voice was hoarse. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, but she'd done it. She'd told the truth, on the record, in front of the world. Torres walked her out through a back exit, avoiding the media circus at the front of the building. They made it to the car without incident. What happens now? She asked. Now the investigators do their job. They'll dig into Vanguard, Granger, Hale, everyone connected to this. It's going to take months, maybe years. But you started it. You gave them the opening they needed. And what about me? He looked at her. What do you want to happen? She thought about that. For so long, she'd just been trying to survive, to keep her head down, to outrun the past. But maybe it was time to stop running. I want my job back, she said. I want to go back to saving lives. That's all I've ever wanted. Then we'll make that happen. 3 weeks later, Lena stood in the parking lot of Ashford Emergency Services, staring at the building she hadn't entered in almost a month. The review board had reconvened, this time with new members, none of whom had any connection to Kelso. They'd reviewed her case, listened to testimony from Danny and the other medics who'd been on scene, examined Michael Reeves's medical records. Their decision had been unanimous, full reinstatement, back pay for the time she'd been suspended, and a formal commendation for her actions during the Harlow Center collapse. Danny met her at the entrance, grinning. Welcome back, Cross. I feel weird? Everything feels weird right now. They walked in together. The station was busy. Crews prepping rigs, medics checking supplies, the normal chaos of shift change. A few people looked up as she entered. Some nodded, some smiled. One of the older paramedics, a guy named Sullivan who'd never liked her much, actually shook her hand. "Hell of a thing you did," he said. "Taking on the whole damn government. Respect." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she just nodded. Glenn Thorne was in the break room pouring coffee. He saw her, froze for a moment, then walked over. "Lena, I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For doubting you. At the scene. At the hearing. I thought you were being reckless. Turns out you were the only one thinking clearly." "You were doing your job. I don't blame you for that." "Still, I'm sorry." He extended his hand. She shook it. Over the next few weeks, life started to find a rhythm again. Lena went back to running calls, car accidents, medical emergencies, the occasional overdose, normal work, the kind that didn't make headlines. But things were different now. People recognized her. Patients asked for her by name. Other medics wanted to know about the techniques she'd used, the training she'd received. She deflected most of it, kept her head down, focused on the work. The FBI's investigation into Nightingale was ongoing. Senator Granger had resigned from Congress, citing health reasons. General Hale was under house arrest, awaiting trial on charges of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Vanguard Solutions had been dismantled, its assets seized, and one by one, the truth was coming out. Documents were being declassified. Witnesses were coming forward. Families of the dead medics were finally getting answers. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean. But it was justice. 2 months after her testimony, Lena got a call from Michael Reeves. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "In person, if that's okay." They met at a coffee shop downtown. Michael looked good, healthy, strong, alive. His wife and 2 kids were with him. "This is Emily," he said, introducing his daughter. "She's 7, and this is Jacob. He's 4. The kids stared at Lena with wide eyes. "Are you the lady who saved Daddy?" Emily asked. Lena knelt down to her level. "I helped, but your dad's pretty tough. He did most of the work himself." Michael smiled. "I don't remember much about that day, but I remember your voice, telling me to stay with you, that I wasn't done yet." His eyes got wet. "You were right. I wasn't done. I got to see my kids grow up because you refused to give up on me." Oh, Lena's throat tightened. "I was just doing my job." "No, you were doing more than that. You were fighting for something everyone else had already written off. That's not a job. That's a calling." After they left, Lena sat in the coffee shop for a long time, staring at her reflection in the window. A calling. Maybe that's what it had been all along, not just a job, not just a skill set, but a refusal to accept that some lives weren't worth saving, that some truths weren't worth telling. That night, she got a package delivered to her apartment. No return address. Inside was a folder, classified documents, training manuals from Nightingale, records she'd never seen before, and a note, handwritten. "You started something. Don't let it die. There are more of us out there, more stories that need to be told, more people who need someone willing to fight for them. Keep going." A friend. She didn't know who'd sent it, didn't know if it was someone from her old unit, someone in the FBI, or someone else entirely. But she knew what it meant. This wasn't over. Not really. The system that had created Nightingale was still out there, still operating, still using people and discarding them when they became inconvenient, and someone needed to keep shining a light on it. 6 months later, Lena stood in front of a congressional subcommittee again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her sat 3 other former Nightingale medics, people she'd thought were dead, who'd been hiding, who'd seen her testimony and decided to come forward. Together, they told their stories, and the world listened. The program was officially shut down. Compensation was awarded to victims and their families. New oversight regulations were put in place. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But it was something. And for Lena, that was what mattered. Not perfection, not total victory. Just the knowledge that she'd stood up when it mattered. That she'd fought when everyone else had given up. That she'd refused to let the powerful bury the truth. A year after the collapse, Lena received another commendation, this time from the city council. They presented it at a ceremony with full media coverage. The mayor gave a speech about courage and integrity. Michael Reeves stood beside her, alive and smiling. When it was her turn to speak, Lena kept it short. "I'm not a hero," she said. "I'm just someone who refused to quit when things got hard, who chose to fight instead of hide. And I hope that inspires others to do the same, because the world needs more people willing to stand up, to speak out, to save the lives that everyone else has written off." She paused, looking out at the crowd. We all have that choice, every single day. We can follow the rules and protect ourselves, or we can break them when breaking them means saving someone. I know which one I'm choosing, and I hope you do too. The applause was deafening. That night, back in her apartment, Lena sat by the window and looked out at the city. The lights stretched out to the horizon, each one representing a life, a story, a person who mattered. She thought about the people she'd saved, the people she'd lost, the system she'd helped expose, the price she'd paid and the life she'd rebuilt. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't easy. It wasn't safe, but it was hers, and she'd fought like hell to keep it. Her phone buzzed. "Danny, shift starts in an hour. You coming in?" She smiled, typed back. "Wouldn't miss it." She grabbed her jacket, her keys, her medical bag, the same one she'd carried through war zones and collapsed sites and every emergency in between. And she walked out the door, ready to save the next life that everyone else had given up on. Because that's what she did. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because someone had to, and she'd be damned if it wasn't going to be her.